Happy Sunday, everybody. Glad you guys are here today. Everybody doing okay? We're inside, and I know y'all think that we timed that with the song, but we had no control over that, but that was amazing. Hey, glad y'all are here today. Real quickly, today at the end of the service, I believe we're going to baptize 2 people, so that's something we can celebrate when we get there. Some of you may remember back in the fall that I told you all I had jumped into a small group with 4 other pastors, and these are guys who are at different places around the country. One guy's from Virginia, one guy's from Indiana, one guy's from Oregon, and another guy's in South Texas, and we've committed to be together for 3 years. We do 2 retreats a year, we do a Zoom call every month, and we text each other almost every day. And so this past week was time for a retreat, and I said, y'all live in really cold places, why don't you come down here, and I'll host you down here in South Georgia. So they all came down this past week, and there's a picture of them right there, yeah. You know me in the middle, those are the other guys around me. But we spent some time up at the Horse Stamp Inn, if you're not familiar with it, up at Exit 22. Amazing place up there. You should check it out. In the future, Mark and Lori Neal, our hosts, they did amazing and very hospitable, but did a bunch of adventures, you know. But primarily what we're doing is we're sharing and we're encouraging and we're holding one another accountable and we're praying and we're just walking through some things that we don't share with anyone else. But what I'm learning, by the way, is I share with you all way more than they share with their church. So you guys are privileged in that regard, maybe. But I've been thinking about this quote. I just want to show it to you very quickly because it was kind of important for me to step into a group like this one. It just says, if you're making significant progress on the transformational journey of Christian spirituality, you will have 1 or more friendships that support that journey. If you do not, then you are not. It's that simple. And I just kind of wanted to tell you, hey, I'm trying to make an investment in making myself as healthy as I can be, right, and to be the best leader I can be for many, many more years. So I jumped into that group. But you also should know that that's an investment that we made in these guys, okay? So we hosted them this last week, and just to be able to bless them, come rest and hang out and see our area. And so I think the quote holds true for you just as much as it does for me, and that you need some people. Okay, it's just kind of a little commercial today. You need some people in your life who want the same things in their life that you want, and they want you to have the good things that God has planned for you to do it. And you need some people that are going to journey with you together. And the best way to find that around here, as our church grows larger, by the way, just note, doesn't mean a whole lot other than just be aware as the church grows larger. So last weekend was the most people we've ever had in the building outside of Christmas or Easter. So as the church grows larger, you need a group of people to get with. And so the best place to find that is either to jump in on a serving team or to jump into a small group, a connection group. So be on the lookout for those kinds of things and do that. All right. I've been up a really long time and I've had 5 cups of coffee. Anybody else? And it's just another normal Sunday, but I am ready to go and finish this off. So we're going to come to the end of our journey through the life and the story of Job. Have you guys enjoyed this in kind of a sadistic kind of a way? Or at least, has it been helpful? Okay, it's been helpful. So it's been helpful for me. And if you're just joining us, just know that this is part 5 out of 5. And what I want to do today is I want to wrap up Job's story, and then I want to spend the kind of the second part of our time together talking about our story. And let me just set it up this way, is that my wife, Chris, reads a lot of books, okay? She might read 100 books on a normal year, and she's able to do that because she doesn't waste a lot of time. And one of her practices generally with every new book that she begins, a novel, okay, is to open it up to the first page and read the first line, and then immediately go to the last page and read some of the last lines. And in her mind, that doesn't seem to spoil it in any way. It actually tells her a little bit about the story and whether or not it's going to be worth her time to actually read it, okay? So the story's not necessarily spoiled for her because it's all about the journey. How does that character get from the first page all the way over here to the last page, right? It's about the adventure. How do they get from here over to there? Well, on the very first page of Job's story, we learn he's an all-around great guy. He's a savvy businessman. He's very wealthy, had a great family. He's a great dad. He loved God. As a matter of fact, you couldn't find a better person anywhere around better than Job. Unknown to Job, though, and we looked at this in week number 2, God and Satan were actually having a conversation about him in which Satan comes and he says, hey, you know Job, he only loves you because you do good things for him and you give him good things. If we take those away, I bet we'll see his true colors. And so that theory is part of a test. It really becomes a wager. And then in rapid succession, Job loses all of his livestock, all of his servants, his wealth, his 10 kids on the same day. And then on top of that, he loses all of his health. And the majority of Job's story happens between the opening page and the final page. And what happens there is Job and his friends are trying to answer the question of why. Right? Why does all of this pain and suffering happen to Job, who's the best person around? And here's kind of what we want to do today, is that while Job never gets his reasons, okay, whenever you go through pain and suffering in your life, there is always a result, which is where we want to finish today. Now, many times throughout the story, Job thinks, you know what, if I could just talk to God, right? If we could sit down face to face, we could work this out. Better yet, I'd actually like to take him to court and force him to give me some answers. I'd question him because Job has a lot of questions for God, right? Whether or not God's paying attention, whether or not God cares about him, whether or not God is actually powerful enough to do anything about what's happening. And finally, we get over to chapter 38, and God is finally going to speak for the first time in this story. And you get there, you go, okay, now we're going to get some answers. And it says, the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind. And I just stopped there because I suppose it's quite an intimidating thing to actually hear God speak in the first place, and then he chooses to speak from the middle of a Category 5 storm, right? You've got wind, you've got lightning, you got thunder. There's Jim Cantori doing a reporting over there. And so impressive entrance, okay, for a very mighty God. And he said, here's God's first words in the entire story. Who is this that obscures my counsel with ignorant words? Why don't you get ready to answer me like a man, and when I question you, you will inform me. So instead of answers, God's going to ask questions. And he's going to question Job about things that he can't possibly know the answer to. And here's the first question he throws out there. Hey, Job, by the way, where were you when I established the earth? And if you're Job, you go, well, I mean, that's not really fair because I don't know. When did that happen? Tell me when that happened. I'll tell you where I was. And Job doesn't know the answer. Now, many of God's questions are funny. Some of them are downright antagonistic and sarcastic. That's probably why I like them. Many of them are, sometimes I was actually rereading them this week, and I would encourage you to do that. Start in 38, read to the end of the story. You'll see all the questions God asked, but many of them are so direct and penetrating, it just kind of made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and you start to feel bad for Job a little bit. It's like God just keeps coming after him. Okay, smart guy, like what were you doing, by the way, when I put the constellations together? Or maybe you know where the storms come from. Or Job, maybe you know when the next storm is actually going to come. Or how about something a little bit easier, like the reproduction habits of goats? Do you know that one, when that happens? And maybe you get to the end, Job, you would just like to run the planet for a day. Oh, it sounds just a little bit more complicated than you thought, right? That's kind of God's concluding remarks. But see, what God is doing is he's asking leading questions. Okay, you know what I mean? Like if you're a parent, you understand this, and you say to your kids, hey, do you want me to put you in timeout right now? And of course the answer is no, right? I mean, of course, I don't want you to do that. Or my favorite, do you want me to come back there right now? Right, while you're driving in the car, and because I'm a sarcastic kid, well, we are driving 75 down I-95. I'd like to see you do that right now. What God is doing is he's leading Job to see the answers without having to give them. In just a few short chapters, right, God asks somewhere between 50 and more likely close to 80 different questions, depending on how you count them, for a couple of reasons. One of those is that he's getting Job to see, hey, since you can't actually comprehend natural things, how are you supposed to actually be able to understand spiritual and eternal things? And the second thing he's leading Job to see is that if he, God, actually has some control over the universe, then surely Job could see or trust that he has control over his life and your life as well. I'm not going to read all the questions for you. I actually condensed them down into two very basic categories. All the questions, I think, fall into one of these two things. Number one, God created the universe. Like many of God's questions have to do with things that only he could know as the creator. He even talks about the foundations of the universe, like in God's perspective, are just like a building, right? Or things just kind of came forth like a baby being born. Now, and see if you can follow me here, because even if you don't necessarily believe that there is a God, right? If there was a God, you would say, well, how much power would he actually have? Astronomers, by the way, have estimated the number of stars to be more than a septillion. And if you're like me, I don't know how many that is, okay? So it's like a number with 24 zeros after it, all right, a septillion. Now, if you're like me, numbers like million, billion, trillion, and septillion, they all just kind of sound the same after a while. So I thought maybe I'll just put it into perspective for you. Do you know what you were doing 1,000,000 seconds ago? Well, no, because, I don't know, how long ago was that? Well, it was basically a week and a half ago, about 11 days ago. What about 1 billion seconds ago, right? What were you doing 1 billion seconds ago? Well, that's actually 31 years and 8 months in the past, and some of you weren't doing anything. You can't remember it because there was no you to speak of at the time. We're talking 1992, okay? Operation Desert Storm. It's before OJ goes to trial. Kevin had just been left home alone. Does that help you? We just actually found out that Milli Vanilli can't actually really sing. So 92, okay? What about 1 trillion seconds ago? How long do you think that would be? Well, 1 trillion seconds ago was the year 31,000 BC, okay? That's how long that would be. And then you start to think about the fact that there are at least 3 billion trillion stars, each one putting out roughly the same amount of energy as 1 trillion atom bombs every second. And so there are a lot of things in our universe that are so big they actually defy description. These stars exist in an expanse we simply can't comprehend. We have images of faint galaxies that we think are estimated 12 billion light years away, and there's likely more beyond that. All of them, right, what God is making a case for, created in a single moment with a single word from God. And then he's asking Job, hey, Job, by the way, tell me some things about how the universe was created. Not only did God create the universe, his questions center around this. Second thing, God controls the universe. And he covers it all in one sentence in chapter 41, where he says, okay, not only all of that, but everything under heaven belongs to me. Hey, all of creation is under my control, which includes everything under heaven too. So if God truly is indeed the creator of the universe, then God has not left it unattended, and he controls the universe. You actually see this in the beginning parts of Job's story, right? If you go back all the way to the conversation in heaven, even though Satan seems to have some influence over what happened, it was still God who was the one placing the limits on him. I just think it's easy for many of us to sometimes think that God is just like this bigger, maybe a little bit smarter version of us, and that we should be able to understand him and maybe be able to explain what he's doing. What Job is going to actually come to realize is that his version of God was way, way too small. When God's finally done questioning him, Job responds in chapter 42 in verse 3. He goes back to the original question. Hey, you asked me, who is this that conceals my counsel with ignorance? I just want to tell you, I clearly spoke about things I didn't understand. There are things that were too wondrous to know. You said, listen, I'll speak. When I question you, you will inform me. And listen, I got to tell you, I've heard reports about you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore, I'd like to go on record and say this. I am so sorry for what I said. I didn't realize how limited and dumb I really was. Like, you know what? I don't know the answer to any of those things. And now I realize, you know what? I haven't even really had to worry about it and think about it, because apparently you have, right? You know. So I am sorry that I spoke. I see it all differently now. And Job is now going to say, okay, I am going to choose to trust you. And I love this part where he actually goes a little bit deeper to say, you know what, before all this, like, I knew some things about you. I had an understanding, I thought, but now, like, I've had a firsthand experience with the Creator God. Some of you know what I mean, right? You saw your parents' faith growing up. You saw your grandmother had faith. Maybe your best friend had faith. And you thought that you understood it. And you thought maybe, okay, I have a grasp on that. Until the day that you had a first-hand experience with God. You're like, man, I've heard about this. I observed this. But now, like it is real to me. And it is precisely, okay, when Job finally gives up trying to figure it all out, okay, when he finally acknowledges God as the creator and the one in control, it's precisely in that moment that God then begins to heal and restore him. Job finally, okay, he allows, to use our analogy, the waves of pain and suffering to move him towards the loving and gracious and compassionate and strong hand of God. And then, okay, that's the end of the story. And then the blessing comes. Here's how the story ends in chapter 42. The Lord restored his fortunes, doubled his previous possessions. All his brothers, sisters, former acquaintances came to him, dined with him in his house. They sympathized with him. They comforted him concerning all of the adversity the Lord had brought. They even brought gifts of silver and gold to him. So the Lord blessed the last part of Job's life more than the first. He owned 14,000 sheep and goats, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, 1,000 female donkeys. He also then had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And I think it's okay to hit pause there and say, in no way does that take away the pain of the children he lost. He named his first daughter Jemima. She became pretty famous. His second, Keziah, and his third, Karen, which we're still talking about to this day. No women as beautiful as Job's daughters could be found in all the land, and their father granted them an inheritance with their brothers. And God blesses Job with double everything he had in the beginning, except kids. I have a friend who say, of course, that wouldn't be a blessing. I know you love your kids. Job lived 140 years after this, and he saw his children and their children to the 4th generation, and then Job died old and full of days. And we could probably unpack this for a few more weeks, whether or not the blessing is a reward for patient endurance, if you will actually be blessed in your lifetime, or maybe how you will be blessed in your lifetime. Because maybe the blessing you receive is physical, maybe it's material. I told the other services this, so I'll share it with you all as well. If you're like calling a phone number or answering an email or watching late night TV and someone says if you send them money, they'll pray for you and you'll get a lot more in return, that's what we call a scam, by the way. Everybody's clear on that? Like if you want someone to pray over you and you'll pay for it, send it to me. I pray for you already, okay? Maybe the blessing is not answers from God, but his presence. Maybe the blessing comes in the form of an understanding of what's happened in your life. Maybe the blessing is someday in the future, or even way down there somewhere, an eternal reward for when God finally sets everything right in the world. And I want to just kind of say, again, I don't know if you will ever get any reasons for the trouble in your life. I do know there can still be a result. And I want to put a wrap on the series asking a question that maybe will lead us there. We've kind of been using this quote, for a while, where we say we have learned to kiss the wave. So I want to ask the question, how do we learn that? How do we actually learn to kiss the wave? Let me ask it this way. How many of you know that if there is a positive result in your pain, you can likely get through it? Okay, the doctor says, hey, we're going to have this surgery, right? It's going to be some rehab. It's going to be difficult, but on the other side of it, like your leg's going to be bionic, okay? On the other side of the pain, I can get through it, okay? Now, listen, I was there when my wife gave birth, so I've seen this firsthand. There was pain. All right, she nearly crushed my hand during some of those contractions. Maybe some of you guys have been there. She said things I had not heard her say before, at least up to that point. She threw things at people. She spoke harshly to the family doctor of 3 decades, because apparently when you're in labor, having those contractions and there's overwhelming pain and the father's voice apparently is grating on your every nerve, like the only thing you can really do in that moment is to somehow look ahead, right? That in the next few moments or the next few hours, you're going to hold in your arms that little boy or that little girl. So I've been in there, right? And I've seen that. And ladies, you have my utmost respect, okay? We owe you. So hang with me and don't check out when I say this. I've heard that the closest equivalent for a man to experiencing that kind of pain is passing a kidney stone. This is what other people say, okay? I'm not trying to make this up. I've been there too, all right? When you're down on your hands and your knees and it's just like, man, you're in pain and you can't walk and you feel like you're about to pass out and it feels like a miniature saw blade just kind of working its way through your body. Listen, and pardon my language here, but when you're birthing a kidney stone, you want to get through it and be done with it. When you're birthing a baby, on the other side of it, there's a beautiful reward. Are you with me? You're not with me. Listen, my wife has birthed 3 kids. I have birthed 3 kidney stones. Can I tell you one of the biggest differences in the pain is I didn't take any pictures after my delivery and then hang those in the hallway of our house, but we certainly did that with each of our kids. There are some pains that not only would I not change it, I'd even be willing to step into it again. Why? Because of what it produces. See, not that I would necessarily actually choose the suffering I'm experiencing right now, but somewhere on the other side, sometimes we have learned and we've grown and we've seen something about ourselves and God more clearly. So here's where I want to end. Some 2,000 years after Job, the New Testament writer James looks back on his story. And I'm going to give you 3 questions to ask that I think can lead you to learn how to kiss the wave. James says this in chapter 1, verse 2. He says, "Consider it a great joy." Consider it a great joy, brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials. Hey, if you have some difficulty in your life today, you got a challenge, anybody going on with a challenge, then can we just collectively give an excited shout according to James? It's been this way at every service, by the way. Not one person is like, yeah, I'm down with that. You're like, really? Come on, man. And James is writing to Christians who are suffering terribly. And he starts off this little letter by saying, okay, hey, y'all, I just wanted to drop you a line and let you know, it's just a joyous thing to be going through terrible things. And you're like, okay, really? But look at what he attaches to it. He says, because you know that the testing of your faith produces, what's the word? Endurance. And let endurance have its full effect. Let it do some work in your life so that you may become mature and complete, lacking nothing. Question number 1, what is being done to me? Okay, what's being done to me? Okay, you're going to experience some trials and some testing in your life. I seriously think you should work through an exercise where you take a minute, you take an hour, you take a day, and you name it. Right? Is it a breakup? Has it been a divorce? Has it been a death? And maybe it's just for a season, or maybe it just feels like a tidal wave, right? It's a terminal illness, it's an addiction that's out of control, or maybe it's just more than one thing coming at you at a time. It's wave after wave, right? James says to consider that pain in your life. The word he's using there means that it's to give some deep thought to it, like have some time for reflection. What we usually want to do is we actually want to not think about it, right? Hey, I would rather stare at a screen and watch somebody else's life rather than figure out the one I'm living, right? Or I'd like to numb it. I'd like to shop it. We even call it retail therapy. That's right. Find a new relationship. I'm going to deal with it, rather than consider it. Consider it's not natural, right? It's not intuitive, because most of the time we're afraid. Like we're in the middle of a panic here, and that story should have gone a different direction. James is saying, look, you're going to have to keep thinking about it in a way that's meditative. You're going to have to gain a perspective about this. Maybe do some reading, do some journaling. Remind yourself the promises of God. Get some people around you, right, who are walking through that with you. And oftentimes we tend to focus on the reason, and that just seems like the right thing to do, when what we need to do is focus on the purpose. Reason focuses on the past, and purpose focuses on the future. So as you consider it, James says, it's probably going to lead you to understand question number 2, what is being done in me? hey, there's something happening to me, but what's being done in me? James just said that that test gives you the opportunity to endure, and endurance is bringing you to maturity. In other words, something is potentially being produced in your life. You're becoming someone new and different and stronger and more courageous and more faith-filled. I like these words from Christian author Mark Batterson, who says, when we find ourselves in difficult situations, we get so focused on getting out of them that we get nothing out of them. Then we wonder why we find ourselves in the same situation all over again. There's nothing wrong with asking God to change your circumstances, but the primary objective is changing you. The circumstances you're asking God to change may be the very circumstances He is using to change you. In every season of suffering, right, there comes a turning point, which is not usually resolution or result. The turning point is rather when we can adjust our thinking to believing there may be some meaning to the pain. So when you see the waves come into your life, all right, I see this trouble coming, maybe a better question to ask is, okay, I see you. What have you come to teach me? Right? What opportunities for growth actually exist because of how God is shaping me in this? And as long as we see stress and difficulty and pain as an intruder in our life, we will fail to let it teach us and shape us and strengthen us. But if we can somehow expect that God's going to use this pain, right, in our lives to maybe sift us or to prune us or to build us, then we'll have the tenacity it takes to endure the hard time. Good? Third one. What is being done through me? Okay, there's to me, there's in me, but what about through me? Right? More than just getting through this to the other side or maybe learning a lesson in the middle of it, God wants to do something with what you've experienced and to do it for other people. You get to chapter 5, James highlights Job specifically as an example to follow. He says, remember all the old prophets, right? They spoke in the Lord's name as an example of suffering and patience. See, we count as blessed those who have endured. We all heard about Job's endurance, and we've seen the outcome that the Lord brought about. Now, when you read the opening parts of Job's story, and then you look at the end of Job's story, you still wouldn't come up with what he came up with here, that the Lord is compassionate and merciful. But that's James' conclusion. You've seen the outcome, compassion and mercy. Hey, because he didn't give up, right? Job became an example that we're still talking about to this very day. So can I just remind you today that people are watching your life and they're taking notes? Sure, there's a benefit to you as you grow and you mature through suffering, but there are so many opportunities for you to tell a greater story to other people about God's faithfulness. And I think I've officiated maybe 3 funerals the first 5 years that I was the pastor here. And then in the last 6 weeks, I've been part in officiating 4. And I'm talking with my guys group this week, and someone throws out the question, hey, which would you rather do? Would you rather officiate a wedding or a funeral? Listen, your wedding was amazing, and if you get married in the future, I'd be happy to be there and have a part in it, but I choose funeral. And I know that sounds odd, but here's why. I honestly think I'd rather be part of a funeral as a pastor than a wedding, and one of the reasons is that I have had a front row seat to see some of you walk through one of the most, or without a doubt, the most painful season of your life. And to do it in a way that inspires me and encourages me and builds my faith. See, a greater ministry awaits you on the other side of your pain. Right? For some of us, hey, enduring a painful season or a long stretch of suffering, it produces a greater capacity, a greater audience, and a greater influence in your life. So the prayer is, okay, God, get me through so that people can see and hear your name and about your graciousness and your compassion and your fame and your renown. To persevere through something like that, you're likely going to need a vision for the future that's bigger than your pain. So let's try to bring the whole thing to a close if we can. There's a hypothetical exercise by a psychologist named Jonathan Haidt that I tend to find incredibly helpful. I'll just lead you through it. He says, imagine you have a child that's about to be born, and you're handed the script of his life just beforehand. You're given an eraser and 10 minutes to edit the script. The question is, what do you delete or erase? So you start reading it, and you find out that your child has a special need. And what's going to be easy for most kids is going to be difficult for yours, and you don't want that. So you erase that special need. You find out as he gets a little bit older, he's especially strong-willed, and it's going to cause quite a few problems, and you don't want that, so you just kind of erase that part of his personality. You read ahead, you see him going into college through a difficult breakup, and it causes a depression and years of loneliness, and you really don't want that, so you erase the breakup. And then as a young adult, you read that he's diagnosed with cancer. He's got to go through surgery and chemo and radiation, and you erase that. Of course you do. But what if, what if you just erased one of the challenges that teaches him the strength of God? Like, what if you just erased the struggle that would give the rest of his life purpose? Or what if you erased the pain that would have taught him compassion? Or what if you erased the very suffering that was going to bring him to salvation? Right? What if you erased the wave that would have thrown him up against the rock of ages? You don't know. There's just so much we don't see from where we sit. Now, I'm just going to assume all of us have been in the ocean. If you haven't, oh, it's amazing. You should try it out sometime. You need to get in the ocean. I've stood in the water, I've played in the water, I've swam in the water, I've tried to ride a bodyboard in the water before, and when a literal wave comes at you and you weren't expecting it, there's limited numbers of responses, right? You can try to stand up against it and actually brace yourself for impact. You could let it catch you off guard and put you in the spin cycle, if you know what I'm talking about. You could even let that wave carry you out further into more waves. You could give up, right, and just let it crush you. Now listen, I've never tried surfing before, but it's kind of I say it's on my list. It's kind of on my list. Many of you have. But I understand in order to get out to the wave, you have a thing that you have to do, right? So you paddle out, and then the wave comes, and you don't try to go around it. You don't try to fight against it. You go right into it, right? You do this duck dive, and you let the wave go over the top of you, and then, you ride it to safety. Because the best way out is always through. I think that might be my summary of the story of Job. Or maybe for the own challenges in your own life. Hey, the best way out is through. And I don't know what it is that you're experiencing. I don't know what's happening for you. I know that we're all guaranteed to go through difficult things in our life. And so maybe can I somehow come to a place where I do believe that God is the creator, and because he's the creator, he's in control. And what's really happening to me? Like, what is God doing in me? And what could God potentially do through me to tell the greater story of his name and his fame? Well, we're going to conclude like we always do. We're going to be led in worship. If you're a follower of Jesus, you can take communion. That's in the back of the chair in front of you. We're going to have people down front who would love to pray with you today. We've had people all morning coming up to pray, and it might just be as simple as, hey, I need a hand on a shoulder. I need a hug. I need someone just to say, hey, I'm in this with you. Let's go to God on your behalf and ask for patient endurance. So at any time during the last song, just come down front, let one of those people pray with you. And then we're going to do what we did, I think maybe in this service last week. We're going to hold grief in the same hand as joy, because we're going to celebrate baptism. And it's going to be a wonderful thing today. So let me pray for us. God, today I thank you that you have preserved for us this story of Job of patient endurance. God, I just pray for those of us in the room this morning, maybe those who are sitting in a living room or on a soccer field somewhere, watching a baseball game, God, whatever it is that we're going through in this moment today, God, I pray that where we have unbelief, God, you help our unbelief. Where we have trust, you give us more trust. God, that these struggles would not lead us away from you, but that they would lead us closer to you. That's my prayer today, God. God, what is it that you have to teach us in this? God, what is a greater story we can tell others through this so that you become famous? So God, today we just ask for patient endurance like Job. To believe that you have something to teach us about ourselves and about you today. God, we thank you that you are indeed the Rock of Ages, and we're going to pray these things today in your name. Amen.